Greetings my friends, welcome to the second video in a series in which, using the video game Transport Fever 2, I have recreated the Uxbridge branch of the Metropolitan Railway as it was in 1912. Apologies for the smoke from this great Central Express that's just arrived under our vantage point on Station Road at Harrow. The last time we travelled on a passenger train from Uxbridge to Harrow-on-the-Hill. Today we'll make a more unusual journey, following a coal train going to the South Harrow gasworks. On the way we shall uncover some intriguing history. Our train is on its way up from the Met's main depot at Neasden. While we wait, we can have a quick look at Harrow-on-the-Hill station. And I'm putting up a photo now of how the station actually looked at the time. Although this photograph was taken in the 1930s, it had not really changed from the time that it was rebuilt to go from 2 platforms to the 4 platform configuration that we can see at the moment. And there is a lovely video on YouTube of a 1910 cab ride which gives us this view through the station. So let's just move forward a little bit. This is the angle from which that 1930s photograph was taken, and our train should be coming in any second. The track layout that I've used throughout this video is based on the Ordnance Survey map of 1912. However, I must apologise, I don't have suitable 4th rail track, and I've used the ordinary track instead. Let's see if our train is on its way. Yes, here it is. So let's jump aboard. As I've explained in my earlier videos, the branch to South Harrow was the original route of the Uxbridge line. It was to be built by the newly formed Harrow and Uxbridge Railway Company in partnership with the Metropolitan District Railway. But in 1899 the district pulled out of the project and the Metropolitan Railway took over. And they created a junction at Rayners Lane between the original line of the route, which is from South Harrow, that we know today as the Roxas Viaduct, and the new line from Harrow-on-the-Hill. It was a very simple junction, and it was not designed for turning trains around, and this had an important bearing on how they got the trains from Harrow into the gasworks. The gasworks predates the railways. It was built in 1855 to supply town gas to Harrow School and the town of Harrow-on-the-Hill. Town gas was made by burning coal, and huge quantities were needed. It would be brought from the nearest goods yard, where it could be unloaded from a barge or a train. In this case it was the one at Harrow. In fact, that's one we're just passing now. But in 1910 they built a spur directly into the works coming off the Roxas Viaduct, and now they could run trains all the way. But it was tricky. There was no way to turn the locomotive around at the gasworks sidings, and it was not considered safe to shunt the wagons down the viaduct, so they were shunted up it instead. Also, the connection from the gas siding only joined the up line going towards South Harrow. So to go back to Rayners Lane, the train had to go on the wrong track. This needed a lot of signalling and special procedures. In the 1930s, a lot of new sidings went up around Rayners, but the shunt up the viaduct was still required. And we're just passing here West Harrow, the spire of the newly built church of St Peter's. I quite wrongly called it St Andrew's in my previous video. Nice view there across the fields of the gasworks. And the Roxas Viaduct itself is hidden at the moment behind a slight rise in the land. coming down to a road crossing. Today this is Imperial Drive, but when it was built it was just to provide farm access to either side of the tracks. And if we turn the camera to the left, we can now get a nice view of the viaduct. Turning to the right, that building in the middle of the picture there is the site of the farm that was run by Mr. Rayner, who gave his name to the street and indeed to the station and ultimately to the whole area around here. And here's a photo of the original farm, thanks to the archives of Harrow Council. So we're coming into Rayners Lane Halt. We won't of course stop at the platform. The only switch between the tracks is the one that we're just about to cross over, so we have to go the full length of our train up the track before we can reverse back onto the up line. And in fact we'll be following that district line train that's just come in. Track here crosses what appears to be a drainage ditch. It's shown very prominently on the 1912 Ordnance Survey map, but then it disappears completely. The train is now reversed quite quickly. I'm just going to halt the video here for a second because normally this procedure would take a little bit of time, and what I want to do is have a look at the viaduct itself before we go up it. So can orient the right way round. It's very confusing when there aren't many landmarks. There's the district line train that I have frozen, and we're now moving across the fields, and you can see the viaduct. This was designed by the chief engineer of the Harrow and Uxbridge Railway, Walter Atkinson, and I talked about his career and his memoirs in my previous video. The original plan that was approved by Parliament actually called for an embankment and for bridges to be placed at certain specified places, otherwise there would be no access to get across the land at all for an extent of more than 3/4 of a mile. You can see one of the bridges here, and there's another one here. This is Sherwood Road, and there's one here which is the main bridge across North Holt Road. And South Harrow Station, as it was, it's not there now, is shown in the original site. Well, the marshy land that they were trying to build across couldn't support a normal embankment, and Atkinson calculated he would have needed a base something like 70 metres wide, so they went for a viaduct instead. But they still put the bridges in, even though each of the arches of the viaduct, and there were 63 of them, was wide enough to take a road. And today a number of roads do go through the viaduct. Up to 600 navvies, supported by steam cranes and light locomotives, built the bases, the bridge, and had specialist gangs doing the brickwork. When it was built, it was of course visible for miles around, as we've already seen. Nowadays it's quite hard to see it unless you're close to it, because the land around is entirely built up. Well, I'm going to go back and join our train. And let's follow it from this view rather than from the cab view, which you'll see a little bit more. As I said, we've got this district line train ahead of us. That wasn't actually planned. I've got a number of trains running on this layout, but the position of them at any one time is rather hard to determine. It's almost random. So we'll have to wait for that to clear up to the next signal, which it has just done. Now I've put a brake van on this train. I don't know if they actually had brake vans. It's very difficult to find a lot about the running of this particular service. Also, you'll notice that the wagon immediately in front of us is empty. That's just a problem with Transport Fever. If you put wagons on a train, the only way you can have anything in them is if you play the proper game and have the coal trains go to coal mines and fill up with coal and so on, and I don't want to do that, so I'm using them purely for visual effect. Harrow-on-the-Hill to our left, Gasworks is dead ahead, and the newly growing suburb of South Harrow is sort of ahead of us, just beginning to be laid out on either side of the viaduct at the far end. We're approaching the spur that was built in 1910 to go directly into the gasworks, and it is rather fascinating because it's built of concrete, and it was one of the first railway bridges in the country to use that particular building medium. And also an extremely fascinating really is that a chunk of this siding still survives. The gasworks and the main part of the siding and the embankment have all gone, but this little bit that we're coming onto now is still there, and here is a photo of it taken from the other side. You see the houses that we're just about to reach on the other side of the bridge. That's the edge of modern day Stanley Road. There's blocks of flats all around where we are now, but the bit of this siding is still there, and this is what it looks like from Google Street View. And now we're coming into the gasworks siding. 1912 map shows one very large gas holder, which is the one that I've placed there in full view. Behind that were a couple of smaller ones. I think they were the original holders. This gas holder here was itself replaced, I think in the 1930s, with a much larger one. That was the famous gas holder which survived long after the gasworks had ceased operation. It had the letters N and O painted on it in huge characters, and the idea was that pilots who thought they were about to be landing at Heathrow Airport, which isn't very far away, would be warned that they were in fact in line with Northolt Aerodrome. And at least one commercial pilot of a large jet did make that mistake, land at Northolt and have a terrible job getting off again, because the runways there of course are so much shorter than at Heathrow. Coming into the gasworks, we've got all sorts of bits and pieces of equipment that I have put around just to make it look somewhat like it might have looked. I don't know what it really looked like. And we will be here just for a few seconds, and then the train will turn around. Well, not turn around, the train will reverse up the viaduct. You can't turn around, as I explained earlier, but at least the engine will then be at the front and can lead the train down, even though it'll have to go down the wrong side of the tracks to get back to Rayners Lane. our brakeman still loyally looking out. In reality, this train, of course, would have been here for well, which we took to unload. They used to run 2 trains a day, and they were obviously they had several sidings here, so they could have been here for some time. But I suspect they were unloaded pretty quickly, probably within an hour. We've finished unloading. The wagons now really are empty. As we can see if we look back over the train. And we will rejoin the viaduct. The Ordnance Survey map actually shows a lot of empty space in the gasworks. I don't know what there was there, whether it was just land they wanted to reserve for future expansion, or whether it was full of stuff that doesn't appear on maps, such as containers of slag. You can look up the remaining section of the viaduct towards the centre of what is now South Harrow. And there is from this viaduct a lovely view out towards the west. You still get that today. If you go on the Piccadilly line, you do get this lovely view out towards Windsor, and the castle is quite visible. I haven't put Windsor Castle on this map. And as you can see, we are running the wrong way back towards Rayners Lane, because there's no other way to get this train back to Rayners. They improved the points and the connections in the 1930s, but the shunting of the train up the viaduct worried the Board of Trade, well, the Ministry of Railways, or whoever was responsible for it. There were a lot of safety reports and a lot of toing and froing, and the London Underground Railway Society had published a fascinating brochure about the operation of this line. It's mainly oriented towards the way the signals worked, and I don't know anything about signals, but they came across lots of letters of the people from the ministry complaining about the systems and defences made by the railway. It was the London Underground then, of course, and there wasn't a terribly good safety record inside the gas sidings. There are at least half a dozen recorded incidents of wagons derailing. There don't appear to have been any serious injuries. Well, we have caused a Metropolitan railway passenger train going to Uxbridge to be halted, as we obviously been given priority by the signalman. Thank you very much. A scene that repeats today if you've ever travelled on the Piccadilly line or the Metropolitan line down the Uxbridge branch. So often there is a train held up on the other side. And as we steam into Rayners Lane, this is where I'm going to bring this video to a halt. As far as I can tell, they found a way to run the engine around and to haul the train back to Harrow-on-the-Hill, but are not able to replicate that. In Transport Fever 2, you either reverse the train or you run the locomotive around, but you can't do both. And I've chosen to show it shunting the engines up into the sidings. So as we reach our second stopping point on the old drainage ditch, I'll say thank you very much for watching. The train has now turned around. Thank you for watching. and stay with me for the next outing, which will be much simpler. We will follow a district line passenger service from South Harrow to Uxbridge.